The kitchen at the Maddox Ranch was rarely silent, yet somehow it felt that way when Lila worked alone inside it. Even on the busiest mornings when ranch hands clattered in and out, when boots thudded across the porch, when the old screen door slapped back and forth, there was a hush around her, a soft pocket of stillness that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Lila moved carefully, almost delicately, as though she feared breaking the air around her. She was slender but not fragile, more like someone who had learned to step lightly through life, avoiding anything that made noise, attention, or trouble. Most people on the ranch had simply accepted her as the new cook, quiet, polite, and so determined to stay out of the way that she sometimes seemed to disappear entirely. But the truth was, simpler, she preferred silence because silence didn't hurt. The heavy wooden table in the center of the kitchen was covered with vegetables she had been chopping since dawn. A pot simmered on the stove, sending warm curls of steam upward. The scent of onions, garlic, and fresh thyme hung in the air, comforting and familiar. It was the one place Lila felt she could breathe freely, the kitchen, with its warm glow and forgiving walls. Food didn't judge. Meals didn't ask questions. Recipes didn't shout. And yet, despite all her efforts to remain silent, something she'd carried from her old life slipped out whenever she lost herself in her work. Her humming. It came softly at first, no more than breath-meeting melody, a tune she didn't even remember learning. Her mother had hummed it years ago, long before things had gone wrong, long before fear had rooted itself in Lila's bones. The song was gentle, steady, almost like a heartbeat. It made the room feel less empty. She hummed when she chopped vegetables. She hummed when she kneaded dough. She hummed when the memories threatened to rise and she needed something, anything, to anchor her. It was her only indulgence. She thought no one heard it. No one paid attention to her, after all. The ranch hands came through only to grab coffee or a biscuit before heading out. The foreman nodded politely and left her alone. The ranch owner's wife adored her cooking but never intruded. Lila had built her days on the comfort of being unnoticed, but fate, she didn't know, had already decided she wouldn't go unseen forever. That morning, as sunlight spilled across the wooden floorboards, Lila wiped her hands on her apron and leaned over the pot simmering on the stove. The smell was perfect. It reminded her of safety. She closed her eyes and let the melody escape her lips once more. Her humming grew stronger, deeper, more heartfelt. She didn't hear the footsteps. She didn't hear the soft drawl of boots stopping outside the doorway. She didn't realize someone was standing just beyond the threshold, listening to her with a stillness that mirrored her own. Because while Lila believed the kitchen was her quiet sanctuary, the Maddox Ranch was starting its morning outside, and one cowboy in particular was passing by the window, on his way to the stables, just at the right moment to hear a voice so gentle, so unexpectedly beautiful, that it brought him to an immediate halt. He had never heard anyone hum like that. He had never heard her before, and Lila, lost in her thoughts, had no idea that this was the moment her life would stop being quiet. This was the moment someone had finally noticed her. Cole Maddox was the kind of man people noticed, even when he didn't speak, and he rarely did. He worked from before sunrise to long after sunset, moving across the ranch with the quiet certainty of someone who had spent his entire life earning every step he took. He was tall, broad-shouldered, a little sunburned, and carried the kind of patience that came only from years of tending land that never hurried for anyone. Most folks joked that if Cole ever stopped moving, the ranch itself might come to a standstill. He was dependable, steady, a pillar the Maddox family trusted. What he wasn't, what he had never been, was distracted. Not by gossip, not by trouble, and certainly not by a girl in the kitchen. But that morning, as he headed toward the stables with a bundle of tacks slung over his shoulder, Something floated through the open window that made his boots slow, then stop entirely. A sound, soft, fragile, beautiful in a way that didn't feel like it belonged on a dusty cattle ranch. He turned his head slightly, brow furrowing under the brim of his hat. The tune drifted out again, gentle, uncertain yet heartfelt, like it was being sung by someone who wasn't used to being heard. Humming. Her humming. He didn't know her name then, not properly. He only knew she was the new cook, a slip of a girl who kept her head down and hands busy. She didn't talk, didn't linger, didn't draw the attention of ranch hands the way young women sometimes did. In fact, most barely remembered she existed, but Cole had noticed her, not intentionally. She was simply different. Not loud, not bold. Not smiling all the time like the ranch owner's daughters or the visiting neighbors. Instead, she was quiet in a way that made people instinctively lower their voices around her. People thought Cole preferred loud, outgoing women. Women who could banter, flirt, tease him out of his stoic shell. But the truth buried deep where no one could see was simpler. He preferred peace, gentleness, honesty without noise, and the girl in the kitchen radiated all three. Without even trying, his hand tightened on the leather straps. He knew he should keep walking. There were saddles to check, a young mare to train, fences to inspect before the heat climbed too high. Cole Maddox did not stand around listening to kitchen songs, yet his boots refused to move. The humming wasn't just pleasant, it was healing, a sound that softened something in him he didn't realize had grown hard. The longer he listened, the more a strange warmth curled in his chest. He took a step closer. Through the window, he could see her only in glimpses, a braid trailing down her back, slender hands stirring a pot, shoulders slightly curved inward like she was trying to occupy less space than she deserved. Sunlight touched her profile, revealing the faintest smile, one he had never seen her wear outside this room. She looked peaceful. Cole couldn't remember the last time he'd felt that way. He leaned a shoulder against the doorframe, the leather creaking softly, and listened like a man starved for quiet beauty. A strange thought flickered through him. I've been passing this kitchen every day for years. How long has she been humming like this? How many times did I walk right past her without hearing it? And then, unbidden, how could I have missed something this gentle? Cole Maddox, the cowboy who never stopped for anything, stayed rooted to the spot, captivated by a girl who didn't even know he was there. He didn't know why. Not yet. But he would soon. Because the moment she realized someone was listening, both their lives were going to change. Lila didn't notice him at first. Her world, when she cooked, shrank to the small safe circle around her, the simmering pot, the knife gliding through vegetables, the rhythm of her own heartbeat woven into the soft hum escaping her lips. It was the only time she forgot to be afraid. The only time she forgot the rules she taught herself over years of surviving. Don't draw attention. Don't be heard. Don't give anyone a reason to look too closely. But her humming always betrayed her. And this time, it betrayed her to a man who had never once stopped in front of the kitchen door. Cole lingered in the doorway, longer than he planned, long enough for the last stray notes of her melody to fade into the warm air. Only when he shifted his weight did the floorboard beneath him creak. It was a small sound, tiny, almost invisible, but to someone who lived in vigilance it was thunder. Lila's entire body jolted. The spoon clattered against the pot, and she spun around so quickly that her braid whipped over her shoulder. Her wide eyes locked onto him, startled, wary, almost fearful. Cole felt something in his chest tighten at the look. He lifted both hands slightly, palms open, the silent gesture of a man trying not to spook a frightened animal. "Sorry," he said quietly, voice a low drawl softened at the edges. "Didn't mean to scare you." Lila swallowed, the movement small and fragile. I didn't hear you come in. That's on me, he replied. Didn't announce myself. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just thick, aware. Charged with the fact that this was the first time they were truly seeing each other. Cole cleared his throat gently. What were you humming? Her eyes widened further. Nothing. Just something. It wasn't nothing. His tone wasn't teasing. It was soft admiration, almost reverent. It was real nice. Layla's breath caught. No one had complimented her on anything in a long time, not her voice, not her cooking, not even her existence. Compliments belonged to a world she'd stepped out of long ago. She didn't know what to say. So she said the only safe thing she knew. Thank you. Cole nodded once, slow, as if he understood that simple words cost her effort. He stepped just inside the doorway, not too close. Didn't mean to interrupt. Just heard you while I was passing by. Lila looked down at her hands, fiddling with her apron strings. She wasn't used to conversations that didn't carry hidden meanings or dangers. She wasn't used to a man watching her with gentle curiosity instead of harsh expectations. Most folks don't hear me, she murmured before she could stop herself. Cole's brows lifted slightly. Reckon they ain't listening, right? The statement struck her deeper than he intended. She felt her throat tighten, unexpected warmth blooming across her chest. She glanced up at him, really looked at him, and found a man standing there who didn't stare at her like the world owed him something. He wasn't impatient. He wasn't demanding. His presence felt steady, grounding, like a strong fence post hammered deep into the earth. He shifted the bundle of tack on his shoulder. Need me to bring anything in? Supplies? Wood? Water? Lila blinked. Cowboys didn't help cooks. They didn't linger in kitchens. They didn't offer assistance to women who barely spoke above a whisper. No, she said softly. I've got everything. He nodded, almost disappointed but too polite to show it. Well? He touched the brim of his hat. I'll let you get back to your humming. He started to turn away, and for the first time in a long time, Lila felt something unfamiliar tug at her chest. Don't go. But she said nothing. Cole stopped anyway right before stepping out because he realized something. He didn't want the moment to end, and neither. Deep down, did she, for the rest of that morning. Lila truly tried to pretend nothing had happened. That Cole hadn't heard her humming. That he hadn't stood there watching her with eyes that saw far more than she wanted anyone to see. That her heart hadn't jolted at the sound of his voice, but every time she turned toward the doorway, she half expected him to still be standing there. She shook the thought off and focused on her work, rolling dough, stirring pots, laying out bread to cool. She told herself she needed the quiet. It was her refuge, her shield. But an odd emptiness filled the kitchen now that he wasn't in the doorway anymore. She didn't understand why. Outside, the ranch continued its steady rhythm hoofbeats. Shouted instructions, laughter from the younger hands. Somewhere out there, Cole was part of that bustle. Someone like him didn't belong in the stillness she clung to. So when the door creaked open mid-morning, her shoulders tensed instinctively. She expected a ranch hand demanding coffee, or the foreman reminding her of mealtime. Instead, she saw Cole. And this time, he wasn't lingering out of curiosity. He was carrying something. A heavy crate of produce rested in his arms, and judging by the strain in his muscles, he'd carried it the entire way from the supply shed. Lila blinked. Cowboys didn't do this. Cowboys never did this. He set the crate gently on the table, wiped his brow with the back of his hand, then nodded toward the vegetables inside. Thought you could use these, he said simply. Lila opened her mouth, closed it again, then tried, I didn't ask for them. I know, he replied with a small shrug. But they needed bringing in, and I was passing by. She frowned slightly. You were Passing by? Cole didn't meet her eyes. He examined the edge of the crate instead, the faintest flush coloring his sun-browned cheeks, more or less. A warmth bloomed in her chest, something fragile and startled. Like a bird taking its first breath, he was lying. He hadn't been passing by. He had come for her. Silence settled again, but it wasn't sharp or awkward the way she feared. It was gentle, mutual. A silence shared, not avoided. Cole leaned against the counter, careful to keep a respectful distance, thumbs hooked into his belt. He looked like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. Lila chopped quietly, the knife hitting the board in soft, rhythmic taps. She didn't hum, not with him standing there, but the piece she normally forced herself to carve out was suddenly easier, lighter. Cole cleared his throat. Didn't mean to intrude. You're not, she said, surprising both herself and him. The words came out soft but sure. You're. Fine. He lifted his gaze. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither of them looked away. Lila felt it, the strange, unspoken understanding blooming between them. He wasn't here out of pity, or boredom, or curiosity. Cole Maddox was a man who chose his steps carefully. If he'd walked into her kitchen twice in one morning, it wasn't by accident. He looked around the room as though seeing it for the first time. Never realized how peaceful it is in here. She looked around to sunlight, warm walls, the soft sound of simmering broth. It's the only quiet place on the ranch. He smiled faintly. Then I get why you like being here. Another pause. A deeper one. He hesitated, then asked with quiet sincerity, Do you want help with anything? The question struck her like a soft blow. No one asked her that. Not in her old life. Not anywhere. She didn't know how to answer, but she didn't say no. She handed him a bowl of washed potatoes without thinking. Cole accepted them with a nod, settling beside her as though it was the most natural thing in the world. They worked side by side, silent, steady, comfortable, a shared silence. Not lonely, not heavy, just shared. And for the first time in years, Lila felt what it was like to stand beside someone without shrinking. By the end of the week, everyone on the Maddox ranch knew something had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly, like the way the air changes right before rainfall. Cole had never been a man who lingered indoors, yet now he found small reasons, excuses, really, to walk near the kitchen. Sometimes he carried firewood. Sometimes he brought eggs. Once he appeared with a mop no one remembered asking for, and every time he slowed at the doorway, listening for the soft hum he'd heard that first morning. Lila, for her part, didn't hum as freely with people nearby, but when she sensed Cole outside the door, his boots scuffing lightly, his breath held as if not to disturb her, something in her chest eased. She didn't hum loudly, but she didn't fall silent either. They both pretended it was coincidence. The ranch hands knew better. By midweek, whispers drifted from bunkhouses to barns. That new cook. She's scared of something. Heard she ran from trouble back east. Girl jumps if you sneeze too loud. Cole seems mighty protective all of a sudden. Yeah, but she's damaged, ain't she? The word damaged reached Cole's ears on a Thursday afternoon. He had been tightening the saddle cinch on one of the younger horses when two hands nearby spoke in muted voices, thinking he wasn't listening. Cole didn't react immediately. He wasn't the kind of man who snapped or yelled. But something cold and hard settled under his ribs. Damaged? They didn't know her. Hell, he barely knew her. But what he did know, what he understood in his bones, was that the world had already done enough to her. It didn't need the weight of careless words piled on top of whatever she carried. He tugged the cinch one last time, told the hands to mind their work, and walked away before the anger in him could escape. That evening, he found himself drifting again toward the kitchen, inside. Lila was slicing herbs, her fingers moving with careful precision. Her braid hung low, a few loose strands brushing her cheeks. She looked peaceful, but also tired, as though something invisible was pressing down on her. "Evenin'," Cole said softly. She startled, but not as sharply as before. "You're back." He shrugged. "Seemed to end up here a lot." Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. "I noticed." The admission sent a strange warmth through him. Cole leaned a hip against the counter, watching the way her hands moved. She worked like someone who feared mistakes, someone who had been taught that perfection was survival. "How was your day?" he asked. She hesitated, fingers pausing over the cutting board. "Fine." He didn't push. He never pushed, but she seemed distracted, uneasy. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her gaze flicked to the windows as if expecting someone to appear. Then she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "People have been talking." He stiffened. "About you?" She nodded. "Someone said I looked troubled." Cole exhaled slowly, reining in the flare of protective anger rising in him. "They don't know what they're talking about." Her jaw tightened. "Maybe they do." He stepped closer, not enough to startle her, just enough for his voice to reach her clearly. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "Anyone can see you've been through something, but trouble don't make a person weak. And it sure don't make them less." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears but with surprise, like no one had ever said such words to her. She opened her mouth to respond, but a sudden loud laugh from outside made her flinch violently. A ranch hand walking past had shouted something to a friend, oblivious to the effect it had on her. Cole noticed. Every part of him noticed. "Lila," he said gently, "whoever hurt you? They ain't here." She swallowed hard. But what if they come looking? The question cut deeper than she intended. Cole straightened, his expression turning serious, steady, unshakably calm. "Then they'll answer to me." The moment hung between them fragile, raw, powerful. Lila looked at him then, really looked, and realized something terrifying and comforting at once. Cole Maddox didn't see her as damaged. He saw her as someone worth protecting, and that changed everything for the next few days. Cole found himself listening for her humming more intentionally than he meant to. It wasn't that he wanted to intrude on her space. He just wanted to know she was all right. With each passing sunrise, the ranch felt different. Its long stretches of silence, once comforting to him, now felt incomplete unless he heard that quiet melody drifting from the kitchen window. And Lila, though she barely admitted it to herself, had begun to expect him to, not loudly, not openly, but in the small ways her eyes flickered toward the doorway whenever the morning stretched on without him, in the faint breath she released whenever his boots scuffed the floorboards, in the tiny, fleeting smile that softened her features when she realized it was him and not someone else. Still, she hummed less. The stranger's arrival, the ranch hand's whispers, the weight of old memories, they all pressed on her, tightening her chest until her gentle tune remained trapped behind her ribs. But one evening, unexpectedly, she hummed again. It was near sunset, the sky outside painted in amber and lavender. Lila stood at the stove, stirring a pot of stew that would feed the ranch hands after a long day's work. She was exhausted. Her shoulders sagged. The circles beneath her eyes were darker than usual. And yet, the melody came out anyway. Not the light, drifting tune Cole had heard that first morning. This one was deeper, older, more sorrow than sweetness. Cole had just finished brushing down a horse when he heard it. He paused mid-step, head lifting. That wasn't the humming of a woman lost in her work. That was someone remembering something, someone grieving something. He followed the sound. When he reached the kitchen doorway, Lila didn't notice him. She was too caught in the tune, her gaze fixed on the rising steam, her mind far away. Her lips trembled on certain notes. Her fingers tightened around the wooden spoon. Cole waited until the song faded on its own. Then he spoke, voice low and careful. That wasn't the same song as before. Lila stiffened. For a moment, he saw panic flood her eyes, as if she'd been caught doing something forbidden. But then she sagged against the counter, too tired to hide. No, she whispered. It isn't. He stepped inside slow, giving her time to stop him if she wished. She didn't. What is it? He asked gently. Her breath hitched. She looked down at her hands, knuckles whitening. A lullaby for a baby? He asked softly. For me, she said after a long pause, words barely audible. My mother used to sing it when I was very small. Before things got bad. Cole's chest tightened. He didn't ask what bad meant. He didn't need details. He could feel the weight of it in her voice. She'd hum it when she cooked, Lila continued, eyes far away. I remember. Holding on to her apron, listening to her. Thinking that nothing could ever hurt us as long as she kept singing. Her voice broke. She stopped singing when everything changed. Cole moved closer. His hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. Not yet. You don't have to tell me, he murmured, but she shook her head. I want to. I don't know why, but I do. He waited, patient, solid, a steady presence in a world that had given her very few. Lila took a shaky breath. I hum because it's the only piece of her I still have. But sometimes, when I hum that lullaby, it feels like reopening a wound. Cole's heart ached not in pity, but in fierce, protective tenderness. He finally let his hand rest gently on her arm. You ain't alone in it now, he said softly. Not anymore. Lila looked up at him, eyes glistening, not crying. Just open in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be before. For the first time, she felt seen without fear, and Cole felt something shift inside him, quiet but undeniable. Her song had secrets. And now he held them gently, as if they mattered. As if she mattered. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of hay and freshly churned earth. Lila moved carefully around the kitchen, chopping onions and stirring a simmering pot of stew. She hummed softly, trying to ground herself in routine, in the familiar, the only things. That made her feel safe, but the calm was shattered by the sudden clatter of boots outside the kitchen door. Lila stiffened, her hands freezing mid-motion. Her heart pounded. Something about the sound wasn't like the ranch hands who came and went. It was heavier, more deliberate, and carried an edge of command. Cole, who had been checking on the horses nearby, noticed the tension immediately. His instincts, honed by years of life on the ranch, told him something was wrong. He set the bridle aside and moved quickly toward the kitchen. Boots crunching over the gravel. The man in the doorway was tall, rough-edged, with a hardened expression that didn't belong on this peaceful ranch. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Lila. I'm looking for her, he said, voice flat, almost chilling. She belongs to me. Lila's blood ran cold. Her hands trembled as she stepped back, the spoon clattering to the floor. Memories she had fought to keep buried, the threats, the running, the fear of being taken rushed back in an overwhelming tide. Cole's protective instinct surged. He stepped forward, placing himself between Lila and the stranger. She don't belong to anyone, he said firmly. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable warning. And you ain't taking her anywhere. The man's eyes narrowed, sizing Cole up, but he underestimated the cowboy's resolve. Cole stood tall, shoulders squared, and a quiet authority radiated from him, something the stranger could not break. I don't know what you think you're doing, Cole continued, but she's safe here. On this ranch, She answers to no one but herself and those who protect her. Lila's fear didn't disappear, but Cole's presence anchored her. For the first time, she realized she wasn't alone. She didn't have to face this threat by herself. The stranger hesitated, calculating, then stepped closer, trying to intimidate both of them. Cole's hand rested near his belt, not threatening but ready. Every muscle in his body was coiled, prepared to defend her. "You'll regret standing in my way," the man sneered. Cole's voice was ice cold. "Try me. You won't get what you're after." The standoff seemed to stretch for minutes, though in reality it was only seconds. Then the man, recognizing the unyielding strength in Cole's eyes and the invisible walls of protection surrounding Lila, finally relented. With the last glare, he turned and left, his boots echoing down the porch steps. Lila sank onto a chair, hands gripping the edge tightly. Her knees shook, and tears pricked at her eyes not from fear alone, but from relief. The danger was gone. For now Cole knelt beside her, voice gentle. "You're safe. No one's coming for you here. Not while I'm around." She looked up at him, her lips trembling. "Thank you." You don't need to thank me," he interrupted softly. "Just don't stop humming. Don't stop letting yourself be seen, not by anyone." For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Lila felt a sense of security she had never known. The kitchen, the place she thought was only for cooking and solitude, had become a sanctuary. A place where she could breathe, where she could exist without fear. And thanks to Cole, she could finally start believing that safety and kindness weren't fleeting illusions. As the sun rose higher, casting warm light across the wooden floors, Layla took a shaky breath and hummed again. The notes were soft, fragile, but filled with hope. And Cole listened, unwavering, standing guard over the girl who had finally begun to trust that someone could care enough to protect her. For days after the confrontation with the stranger, the ranch felt as if it were holding its breath. The air itself carried a difference, something taut and uneasy that even the animals sensed. Horses fidgeted more than usual. The dogs barked at shadows near dusk. And the ranch hands, though pretending everything was normal, worked with an edge of alertness. But no change was more noticeable or more painful than the silence in the kitchen. Lila stopped humming. Not just the lullaby. Not the lighter tunes she used to sing while chopping vegetables. Not even the quiet, unconscious notes she'd sometimes let slip when she thought she was alone. Silence. Absolute silence. At first, Cole told himself it made sense. Lila had been shaken, terrified even, when the stranger showed up demanding she return with him. Anyone would go quiet after a scare like that. Anyone would be rattled. But by the third day, something gnawed at him. Not hearing her voice felt wrong. Like part of the ranch had gone dark. By the fourth day, he found himself lingering outside the kitchen with an ache in his chest he didn't know how to name. And by the fifth, he realized something with a sharp jolt. She wasn't just quiet. She was withdrawing, shrinking again. Folding in on herself like she had the first week she arrived. Every time Cole entered the kitchen, she greeted him politely, but with a distance that hadn't been there before. Her eyes darted to the windows more often. Her shoulders flinched at louder noises. And she never turned her back to the door anymore. Her safety had been shaken, and she had retreated behind invisible walls. Cole noticed every detail. One evening, he stepped inside to find her cutting carrots with quick, mechanical movements. Her jaw was clenched, her eyes shadowed. She barely glanced his way. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded without looking up. "I'm fine." It was the kind of fine people said when they were breaking. Cole exhaled slowly. "You haven't hummed in days." Her hand froze on the cutting board. For a moment she didn't move at all. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, "I don't feel safe enough to." The truth sat heavily between them, raw and unvarnished. Cole stepped closer. Not too close. Enough to be steady. You are safe. She shook her head. He found me once. He can find me again. Then he'll answer to me again, Cole said firmly, but Lila wasn't reassured. He could see it. Whatever the stranger represented, whatever past she carried, had dug its claws into her again. She breathed out a shaky whisper. I don't want to bring trouble here. Cole felt something fierce rise in him, not anger at her, but anger at the world that had taught her she was a burden. You're not trouble, he said, voice low but solid. He stopped himself. The words felt too strong, too revealing. What he wanted to say was, you're important. You're worth protecting. You matter to me. Instead, he managed, you belong here more than that man ever will. Lila swallowed, her throat tight. You don't even know the whole story. Then tell me, he said gently. She looked up then, eyes bright with the beginnings of tears she refused to shed. I can't yet. He nodded. He didn't push. Pushing would only make her retreat further. Then don't, he said softly. Not until you're ready. She stared at him a long moment. Something in her gaze trembled, fear, gratitude, longing, confusion. A storm of emotions she wasn't used to letting show. Outside, night settled over the ranch. Crickets hummed. Wind rustled through the grass. But inside the kitchen, there was still silence, painful, heavy silence. Cole didn't try to force her to hum again. Didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He simply stayed, quiet, present, unmoving. A steady presence in the doorway, letting her know without speaking, even if your song is gone for now. I'm not going anywhere. Elijah hadn't meant to overhear anything. He had only meant to return the apron Clara always left hanging by the porch door, the one she forgot in the garden when she'd gone to soothe Jacob after a nightmare. But as he stepped quietly into the hallway, the low murmur of voices floated from the sitting room, soft, tense and unmistakably about her. Mrs. Halvorsen, the ranch's longtime neighbor and midwife, was speaking in her clipped, worried way. Clara hides it well, she said, but the girl's been worked half to death before she ever got here. Shoulders all bruised like she's been lifting stoves alone. And those scars, those aren't from kitchen accidents. Elijah froze. His hand tightened around the apron. The old woman continued, I don't know where she came from before you took her in, but someone didn't treat her kindly. You should know that. Elijah's heart thudded painfully. He didn't want to intrude, didn't want to listen, but his feet remained rooted. Mrs. Halvorsen sighed. And there's something else. She flinches, Elijah. Not from you, not from anyone here, but from memories. She hides it well, smiles through it, hums through it. But something happened to that girl. Elijah stepped back, almost stumbling, the words like a blow. Clara? Hurt? Clara, who had smiled at dust storms, laughed when Jacob spilled flour everywhere, hummed while hanging laundry. He had thought she was simply quiet, gentle, reserved. He had not imagined she carried shadows. He slipped out of the doorway before either woman saw him. He walked out to the porch, then further to the barn, to the quiet dark where the scent of hay steadied him. For a long moment, he just breathed. Then the barn door creaked behind him. He knew that humming without looking. Soft, almost accidental. The tune she used whenever she didn't want anyone to know she was nervous. Clara stood in the doorway, her hair loosely braided, cheeks a little pink from the warmth of the stove. She held the apron he had dropped. He hadn't even noticed dropping it. You forgot this, she said gently. He turned toward her and saw it now. The faint pink scar near her collar, the slight favoring of her left shoulder, the softness in her eyes that came not from innocence, but from surviving something that had tried to break her. Clara noticed him looking too closely and instinctively shifted, hiding her shoulder behind her arm so subtle most men wouldn't notice. But Elijah had noticed. "Clara," he said carefully, softly, "have you ever been treated wrongly? Before you came here?" Her breath hitched. In that second, he regretted asking. Not because he didn't want the truth, but because he never wanted to be the cause of that flicker of fear in her eyes. "I don't mean to pry," he added quickly. "You owe me nothing. I heard something I shouldn't have. And now I'm worried for you." She looked down at the apron in her hands. Her fingers twisted the strings. When she spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "It wasn't this place," she said. "It was before. A kitchen can be a cage, Mr. Elijah, when the house around it is cruel." Elijah's jaw tightened, anger rising not at her, never at her, but at the faceless people who had taken such a gentle soul and treated her like something disposable. Clara lifted her eyes, meeting his gaze straight on for the first time. "But I'm safe here," she said. "You've never asked more of me than kindness, and I'm trying to be worthy of staying." "Clara," he said, voice thick, "you don't have to earn safety, or keep it by working yourself to pieces." Her lips trembled not in fear, but in something dangerously close to relief. Then she whispered, "I didn't know men like you existed." And Elijah realized in that barn drenched in moonlight that protecting her wasn't something he wanted to do out of pity or duty. It was something he wanted with his whole heart, because somewhere, between her quiet humming and his silent admiration, he had already started falling for her. Morning on the Maddox Ranch always carried a quiet magic. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floors of the kitchen, turning the dust motes into golden specks that danced in the air. For Lila, mornings had always been a mixture of routine and solitude, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and humming softly to herself while the ranch slowly came to life outside. But that morning was different. Lila hummed again. Not the heavy, secretive lullaby she had sung to remember her past, but the lighter, gentle tune Cole had first heard weeks ago. Her voice wove through the kitchen like sunlight threading through the cracks of an old barn, warm, tender, unafraid. She didn't realize he was there until she caught the shadow on the floor. Cole Maddox, standing in the doorway with his usual quiet confidence, watching her. But this time, he didn't merely linger. He smiled, a small, soft curve of lips that made her chest flutter in a way she hadn't felt before. "Morning," he said gently, voice low, carrying the calm assurance that had become her anchor. She paused, spoon mid-stir, cheeks heating slightly. "Morning," she murmured back, unsure why her voice felt so delicate in his presence. Cole stepped further inside, careful not to crowd her space. He didn't need to. Lila had already moved closer to the counter, preparing breakfast for the ranch hands. But there was an unspoken awareness in the air, an acknowledgement that this wasn't just another day. Not anymore. He leaned against the counter, thumbs hooked into his belt. His eyes followed her hands as they moved with practiced precision, but his attention never left her face. "I heard you hum," he said softly. "You're back to it." Lila swallowed, unsure how to respond. For a long time, she hadn't dared to hum freely. She had stopped herself, stopped her own voice from spilling into the world. And now, here he was, listening again, steady, patient, unwavering. She began, then stopped. Words weren't enough. She let the melody fill the space instead, soft and tentative, yet stronger than before. Cole's chest tightened not with longing, but with something fiercer, protective pride, admiration, and the realization that this woman, quiet though she seemed, had survived far more than he could imagine. And now she was present, humming for herself, for him, for the first time without fear. He cleared his throat gently, leaning closer. "Lila," his voice softened, each syllable careful, deliberate. I want you to keep humming. Every morning if you'll let me hear it. Her hand stilled. She looked up, eyes wide, heart racing. Every morning? Every morning, he confirmed, voice firm but tender. If you'll let me. There was a pause. Long enough for the scent of the stew, the warmth of the kitchen, the golden sunlight streaming in, to fill the space between them. Then Lila smiled the first full, unguarded smile she had allowed herself in weeks. I think I'd like that, she said softly. Cole smiled in return, the kind of slow, quiet smile that carried promise and hope. He extended a hand, not commanding, but offering a simple gesture, asking if she would step into this new chapter with him. She took it. Fingers brushing against his palm, a spark of connection passing between them. Good, he murmured, because I'm not leaving your kitchen or your humming anytime soon. And as the morning light wrapped around them, filling the room with warmth, Lila realized something profound. The kitchen was no longer just her sanctuary. It was the place where she had been seen, heard, and finally, quietly cherished Dot and Cole Maddox. The cowboy who never stopped for anything had stopped for her, not out of duty, not out of curiosity, out of something far deeper, love. For the first time, Lila allowed herself to hum freely, letting the song rise without restraint. And Cole listened, every note anchoring the beginning of a life neither of them had dared to imagine. But now, together they would create it, one quiet, golden morning at a time.